Want to know why Michelle and I are so high on TJ Hockenson and Darren Waller in fantasy football? It's time to look at our tight end rankings as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk. I'm a researcher for the NFL Network and a fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
All right, we've had rankings all week here, Michelle, so we're going to finish it up here. We've looked at quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, what's left, tight ends. We're going to go 1 through 24, look at our rankings, compare, contrast, analyze, break it all down for you. So good week of rankings here, good way to end the week. Welcome to Locked On Fantasy Football, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. We're part of Locked On Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen every day as we help you try to dominate your 2023 fantasy football drafts. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Michelle, let's dive right into it. And with tight end, I think we're a little bit on the same page on a lot of these guys. And I think sometimes it's really hard to rank once you get out of the top grouping here. So let's go down here. We agreed on the top 4. They're all the same. Travis Kelce, TJ Hockenson, Mark Andrews, and Darren Waller. We deviate at 5, where I am looking at George Kittle still being important here. You have Kittle at 6. You have Dallas Goedert at 5. Kyle Pitts at 6 for me. Kyle Pitts at 7 for you. I've Goddard down at 7. And then different guys round out our top 8 here. We'll go through the 24 through the course of the show. Michelle is in Engram, and I've got Dalton Schultz. So let's start here. I mean, this is great. We have some harmony to end the week here. We are banging the table for TJ Hockenson. A lot of places you see him behind Mark Andrews. A lot of places you see him even behind George Kittle at this point. So here, let's just bang the drum, not slowly, but quickly here for TJ Hockenson. I'll let you go first, Michelle. Why are we so high on Hawk this year?
Yeah, I mean, I was getting a little scared because he wasn't at training camp for a while here, but it turns out I think it was just a really nasty ear infection, if everyone's telling the truth. So he should be fine for the season. But he had the second most receptions among tight ends last year, behind only Travis Kelce. And that was from weeks 9 through 18 once he got traded to the Vikings. And he was killing it during that span of fantasy points with over 13 fantasy points per game, which was behind only Travis Kelce and George Kittle during that time. And then we go into the playoffs, and it's not like it slowed down at all. They only got to play one playoff game because they lost against the Giants. But in that wild card game, 11 targets, 10 receptions, 129 yards. He was being used a ton in this offense. And we know, like, he came out in this draft, or in his draft class, is a tight end that was supposed to be super special. And we didn't really get to see that with the Lions. He had a lot of injuries. They didn't utilize him consistently. But I think Kirk Cousins is going to look for TJ Hockenson regularly this season, even with the addition of Jordan Addison.
Yeah, and with Hockenson, I think he was underutilized a bit with Detroit. And you can stay on the field, and that was part of it. And we know he's buddies with George Kittle, and they have some similar durability issues on top of coming out of Iowa. We'll talk about the new Hockenson, who might be the new Kittle as well, a little bit later out of Iowa. But you look at Hockenson, just a superb athlete, and I think he's really helped by Adam Thielen gone because, again, middle of the field, reliable target, red zone, all that stuff that you look at. So Jordan Addison is going to be pretty good here, but he's a smaller body. Hawkinson's the guy who can go up and get it. We know Adam Thielen was very good with Kirk Cousins for that. He lived a lot on his touchdown value. So that's what I like, is that you're going to get touchdowns out of Hockenson as well as stretching the field. I remember, I think it was his first game against the Cardinals, and he just blew up for the Lions. And I said, okay, we're in business with this guy. But then you drafted him and you were like, okay, he's okay. But last year with the Vikings, and it was a very surprising trade, division trade in the middle of the season. Then here's the Hockenson that we were looking for a long time. It just had to be in a different team in the NFC North. So on board with Hockenson. Look, Mark Andrews is special, but Hockenson is in a little better situation, I think. I mean, Andrews has to compete with some now wide receivers in the mix all of a sudden, where Hockenson is going to be at worst a 1A, 1B proposition with Jordan Addison, maybe a little KJ Osborne. They're behind Justin Jefferson, but I still think he's going to be the second target for Kirk Cousins, and that's what we love about these early tight ends. Now, we also have an agreement at number 4, Michelle. We'll get into this one. Darren Waller that we're going with. And again, he might actually be the primary target at this rate. I mean, who are the Giants throwing to? They got Sterling Shepard back, Darius Slayton back. Who's out there? I mean, there's Jalen Hyatt as a big play threat. You got Wan'Dale Robinson. Who knows what you're going to get from him? You have Isaiah Hodgins. I mean, this is just a mixed bag of what is this? And then you have Darren Waller in here. So is that kind of why you like Waller here? Because look, Daniel Jones is a young quarterback. You've got 2 offensive guys who like the tight end, going back to Travis Kelce, Mike Kafka, and Dawson Knox with Brian Dable. Everything seems to line up here for Waller. And I think that's probably where you're thinking as well. But go ahead and break down why we think Waller's going to be Waller again.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it comes down to him being healthy. So he's scored the 4th most fantasy points per game among tight ends since 2019, only behind Kelce, Kittle, and Andrews. His issue is he's been dealing with injuries over the last couple of years. But this is even those fantasy points was even including last season, where he was pretty disappointing overall. But in 2021, he was a tight end 6 in points per game. 2020 he was a tight end 2, and 2019 tight end 6 again in points per game. And like you already said it, like he could be the top target in this offense. And everything we're hearing out of camp is that he is. There was even a really funny report that said that they like the coaches are like taking Darren Waller off the field to make sure that Daniel Jones will pass to somebody else because he's just going to Waller over and over and over again. But we know how explosive Waller is. He had 28 total receptions last year, and 9 of them went for 20 plus yards. Absurd rate. So if he gets the targets in any offense, he's going to be great. But Daniel Jones, I think, will be looking for Waller very, very consistently if he's healthy on the field.
Yeah, and some of these quarterbacks that really use the tight end as a security blanket, they're great in fantasy, and definitely Daniel Jones is going to facilitate a lot of Waller scoring there. So we're excited about that. Now, we have a little difference of opinion. I think you're still high on the guy at number 8 in Dalton Schultz. We've talked about him quite a bit, being a key part of that Texans offense that has a lot of vacated targets, trying to figure out Tank Dell, Robert Woods, and all those guys that they have. And then you have Evan Engram on your list. So I think when I look at it, Dalton Schultz, I think he's going to have to be a key target right away for C.J. Stroud. I saw Stroud in his debut struggle to push the ball downfield. He's going to have to throw shorter passes here to Schultz and Dell probably a lot. There's not a lot also on the field. You got Woods, you got Mechie, you got maybe Nico Collins stretching the field from time to time, but I don't think they're going to be able to stretch the field with C.J. Stroud as much as they like. So Schultz underneath, he's been very valuable to the Cowboys. He now goes from Dallas to Houston, and we've talked about Brandon Cooks. It's kind of they've traded places, right? Brandon Cooks is in the Schultz role. Schultz is in the Cooks role kind of on these two teams. So that's why I like Schultz in the top 8. I don't mind him at all being that aggressive. And with Engram, I think, Michelle, just the concern is, and maybe you can address that, is just too many weapons, right? Christian Kirk, Zay Jones on top of Calvin Ridley and Travis Etienne, and who else ever they want to throw in this mix. So that's my concern, is that Engram will be maybe the 4th option at best in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I'm like already regretting putting Evan Engram at number 8. It's just one of those things where he could definitely finish at number 8 at the end of the year. Like he had a really, at the end of the season, when it was all said and done, Evan Engram looked like he had a pretty solid fantasy year last year, but so many of his points did come in one game. He had like 38 points in one game at one point. But he did start to come along towards the end of the year. And I do think he's in the much better offense than Dalton Schultz, right? So, yeah, there might be better playmakers around, but also there should be more scoring opportunities. He only scored 4 touchdowns last year. So I think there's room for growth there. And I just like, how many times are the Texans really going to be down near the goal line to target
Yeah.
Schultz in the end zone? I think Ingram's going to have a lot more of those opportunities because of all the weapons around him. And with Schultz, I am still high on him because I think in PPR leagues specifically, he should get a good amount of targets, and he's been good for fantasy over the last few years with the Cowboys. But I'm feeling a little less confident now about how many targets he will get because I'm getting so high in Tank Dell, and we saw him, he's breaking out early in his
Yeah.
rookie year so far in camp. And then John Mechie is back healthy, and Nico Collins is getting good reports. So maybe he doesn't need as many targets as we thought he originally did. But I'm not taking Evan Engram in my draft. So I have him as tight end 8. I'm not drafting him, though. So take that for what it is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And for what it's worth, you have Schultz at 9. So we're just splitting a little bit of a difference here. But yeah, we're probably on the same page a little bit with Evan Engram. I mean, I don't have him that far down either at 12. So it's not like I have him out of tight end situation as a potential starter here. But I think what it is, Michelle, would you agree that some of these guys, you start to have question marks, right, at starting at 9 through 16?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to jump into those tight ends from 9 through 16. I know we definitely disagree on my Steelers guy, Pat Freiermuth. But before we jump into those guys, let's talk about our sponsor, LinkedIn. So these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. We all know how important it is to start the year strong. The right team member might help you do that. It is super easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs. And their simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Vinny, run us down both of our rankings for our tight ends 9 through 16.
Yeah, it's quite interesting list. We'll go through yours first. Dalton Schultz at 9. We have Sam LaPorta coming at 10. I think we'll talk about him in this segment as well as Pat Freiermuth. 11 is Hunter Henry, the aggressive ranking there. I like it. Greg Dulcich at 12. For Pat Freiermuth 13. Zach Ertz coming off the knee injury. He looks healthy here. He's 14 on your list. 15 is David Njoku. 16 Chig Okonkwo. Now, let's go through mine. I have Pat Freiermuth at 9. I have Okonkwo at 10. LaPorta just about where you have him at 11. Evan Engram, as I mentioned, the last tight end one on my board at 12. Greg Dulcich, 13. David Njoku, 14. Juwan Johnson makes an appearance at 15. And Dalton Kincaid rounds out my top 16 there, 9 through 16. So let's start with the two things that stand out here. Pat Freiermuth, we totally disagree on here, the way we're looking at it. It's only 4 spots, but that's still enough of a disagreement where we think he's going. And then Sam LaPorta. We love Sam LaPorta. And this is the guy that I was talking about could be the new Hockenson / Kittle or join the club of Iowa tight end. So let's talk about both those guys here. And I'll still let you start with your Steelers guy and why you're down on him. And I think you have a good reason.
Yeah, so I think most of the fantasy community agrees with you, right? His ADP is right around where you have him ranked. So I'm definitely on one side and everyone else is on the other. I could be dead wrong, but he just doesn't have enough upside for me to take a shot on him, even though he's going, in the 8th, 9th round of draft. So it's not a super high pick, but he was just a tight end 11 last year in points per game with 98 targets and 63 receptions. I don't think that happens again this year. No one is paying attention to how good Connor Hayward is. He's a second-year tight end for the Steelers. He's too special to keep off the field. Pat Freiermuth will, of course, still be the tight end 1, the starter. They're totally different types of players. Connor Hayward's kind of like that, what am I trying to say here? Just that piece Checkers, no, help me. Chess piece,
Chess.
thank you. I could not think of the word chess. He's that chess piece that you can utilize all over the field, and I think he's going to be on the field a lot more this year and get those targets, which could eat into Freiermuth snaps and targets there. And then they also drafted Darnell Washington. I don't think he hurts them that much, but you have to also consider Deontay Johnson getting so many targets. George Pickens is going to get more targets than he did last year. They brought in Allen Robinson in a trade. He's going to get more. Calvin Austin, second-year wide receiver, is getting hyped. He didn't even play last year. I don't see where 98 targets is coming to Freiermuth. And also all they've said is they want to focus on the run this year too. So I don't really understand where this piece of the pie is coming for him. And throughout his 2 seasons in the NFL, he's only had 4 games with 15 plus fantasy points. Upside's not there, and I don't think the floor is there this year for him. So I have him ranked lower.
Yeah, and maybe that's the whole thing, is that you're playing checkers if you draft Pat Freiermuth, and you're maybe playing chess if you draft somebody else. I think that's what you're getting at. The checkers is a great game, but it's kind of boring, and it gets tiring after a while. Chess is more interesting. You think about it, get some plays, and the end game is more important. So I think you're right on. I don't think he's exciting. I just think you do have to draft a more exciting guy after him. I will say that. I'm not going to just sit on him and say, okay, I'm good. I'm putting him in my lineup every week. I definitely want to back up. But I think if you're stuck a little bit, I think he's a guy you look at and that is safe to some degree. But I think you definitely want to have a tight end with upside. Anyone you draft in this area, right? You want to have 2 tight ends and not just sit on that guy as a starter. Now, Sam LaPorta, we both have as a potential starter. Now, could we be reading too much into the hype? Potentially, but I'm also looking at the numbers. There are not a lot of targets that are accounted for right now based on Jameson Williams' suspension. Is Marvin Jones going to come back and be what he was for a short period of time in Detroit? Are these other guys going to step up after Amon-Ra St. Brown? I don't see it. I don't see Brock Wright either giving him a key run at tight end. So the numbers are there, and we know directly, right? They had an Iowa tight end, Hockenson. They threw to him. Jared Goff liked him, so now they have LaPorta replacing him. So it's a direct line of production sitting there for LaPorta. The only question mark is everyone says, okay, rookie tight ends, you got to wait till year 2. But sometimes you don't if the situation is great. I think this situation is too ideal, and the talent is high. Let's not forget, this guy was a legit athlete at Iowa, maybe a bit overlooked when you look at the Michael Mayers and Dalton Kincaids and looking later in the draft, Luke Musgrave. So I think LaPorta is just good rising talent in the ideal situation.
Yeah, he's in the perfect situation. And even Jameson Williams, news came out on Thursday saying that he hurt his hamstring and he's likely to miss the rest of the preseason. Well, this dude hasn't been on the field at all in his career, and now he's going to miss the first 6 weeks of the season as well with the suspension. It's all just not really lining up great for Jameson Williams. We may have another year wasted for him. There is so much room for targets here. And Sam LaPorta, like you mentioned, is super talented. So last year he generated the 3rd most yards after catch among FBS tight ends last season, and that was behind only Brock Bowers, who's tight end for Georgia, who's going to be an easy first-round pick next year, and Dalton Kincaid, who was drafted in the first round by the Bills. That's the only 2 guys he was behind. 34th overall pick. They have a reason they want to use him. That's a super, super high pick they used on drafting him. And offensive coordinator Ben Johnson has already said that LaPorta has earned the right to play with the starters and get a lot of snaps. So yeah, maybe we're looking into it and just getting way too excited about the hype, but he's in such a prime opportunity. I'm willing to take a shot on a rookie tight end in this situation.
Yeah. So yeah, go after Sam LaPorta. You might get a good value with him. I don't think anyone else is going to rank him this high. So take advantage of that. Make sure that you understand where he is at your leagues or where the cheat sheet puts him at, and get a good steal here, maybe a little bit later, and you can wait on him. So something to keep in mind. Now, you have a couple tight ends that I do not have in this grouping. I do kind of like one of them. I do like Hunter Henry quite a bit. You have him at number 11. I mean, you look at 2 years ago with Mac Jones, he was definitely a key target here, and he just was hurt and had to deal with the whole Jonnu Smith transition was ugly. Mike Gesicki's not going to cut in too much. So I do like Hunter Henry. And I think I like Zach Ertz more because I like to say Ertz. And I feel like they did that a lot at the Women's World Cup because they just like to say Ertz, Ertz. Ertz every time. So I think that's what happened. So he has a great name, and I love Zach Ertz. He's won me a lot of championships here in the past, but knee injury, older tight end. I get the vacated targets. He was very good when DeAndre Hopkins was not there and came over midseason from the Eagles. So that's the best, though, I think we've seen out of Ertz. And I'm really a little bit worried about Trey McBride. I think he's going to have a bigger role as we go forward because he's one of those athletic young tight ends that we haven't seen. So I'm on board with Hunter Henry, and I might have undervalued him, but I am not drafting Zach Ertz, even though he's got me some love in the past.
Yeah, honestly, I think I might have Zach Ertz too low because it just came out, right? Just in the last couple of days here that Zach Ertz is clear to play. He's good to go for the season. We didn't know if that was for sure.
Yeah.
That's why I was keeping an eye on Trey McBride because he was going to get an opportunity if Zach Ertz wasn't there. But if Zach Ertz makes his team and they're keeping him, he's playing over Trey McBride. He's going to get the majority of snaps. It's just like, it's how it's going to work with a veteran like Zach Ertz. And last season, he averaged the sixth most fantasy points per game among tight ends last year. He had 10 plus points in PPR leagues in 8 of his 9 games played, 10 plus targets in 4 of his 6 games from weeks 1 through 6 with Hopkins suspended last year. 10 plus targets for a tight end is insane. And we've been talking about like the wide receivers there. Yeah, Marquise Brown should get a good amount of targets, maybe Rondell Moore, maybe rookie Michael Wilson, but it's going to probably be Zach Ertz and James Conner and Marquise Brown that the backup quarterback is depending on. And really, when you get down towards the goal line, if they're targeting anyone in the end zone, it's probably not going to be 5'2" Marquise Brown. It's going to be big old Zach Ertz. So I think he is one guy that we're just completely overlooking because he's old and boring and not flashy. And everyone wants to draft the Sam LaPortas over the Zach Ertz, which makes sense. It's more fun. But Zach Ertz is going to win you games.
Yeah, I mean, I've liked his body work in the past. Like his athletic profile has been fantastic, and he's produced, and this is why he's still a valuable player, still at his age. So we'll watch that situation carefully. I just don't know if I'm going to invest too much in the Cardinals passing game. I think I'm in on Hollywood Brown, but everyone else, I just don't like the flow. And it's going to be new offense. It's not what we were used to with Cliff Kingsbury. I'm not exactly sure what you're going to get in this Browns-like offense that they've borrowed. Like, could be a David Njoku situation, right, for Zach Ertz, but it also could blow up and not be very interesting. So we're going to watch that carefully, but Ertz, definitely the talent is still there at his age to produce if he can hold off McBride. Now, I'm going to look at my 2 guys that were on here that you didn't have. Juwan Johnson, I just like him as a complimentary receiver. You're looking at Michael Thomas, and if he can't stay on the field and Rashid Shaheed is a big play threat, they need someone that Derek Carr can trust outside of Chris Olave, and Juwan Johnson could get some key targets there. And they also moved on to Adam Troutman. They moved him to Denver to reunite with Sean Payton there. So I think Juwan Johnson has a bigger opportunity here at 15. I think I'm actually more interested in him than David Njoku, who I ranked 1 spot ahead. And I look at Dalton Kincaid. Look, this is just upside. I don't know exactly what I'm going to get from the Bills passing game. Like, we like Gabriel Davis and the potential, but is Khalil Shakir going to be in the mix here? Who's going to be the next guy after Stephon Diggs? Are they going to use Kincaid as a receiver more so and not interfere with Dawson Knox or cut into a lot of his work? So I think this is just an upside play to get Kincaid. Johnson is more, the situation's okay. Kincaid is more about the talent.
Yeah, Kincaid, he does have that upside because he's a super talented young tight end and he's in a great offense. His whole thing that is different than Sam LaPorta is Sam LaPorta has no one to compete with for tight end snaps. And Dawson Knox, like he's going to get his snaps and his targets, and he's like Josh Allen's bestie. So I don't know how much space there really is for Kincaid to blow up in year 1. So I have him ranked a little bit lower at tight end 19. I do see the ceiling there for him, but I think the floor is just way too low. And then when it comes to Juwan Johnson, I thought I was really going to like him, but then they bring in, well, they have Foster Moreau, who's going to be back playing now. They have Taysom Hill, and then they signed Jimmy Graham for no reason. I don't really understand. So they have so many different tight ends there, and you don't know which one's going to play the most. Juwan Johnson did, though. Like he did the thing last year. He was pretty good towards the end of the year. So if he is the one that gets to start and gets to play the most, I definitely could see him being a nice sneaky value there. I just think I don't know what's happening in that tight end room with New Orleans, so I'm staying away.
Yeah, I think this is the portion of the tight end rankings where we're guessing a little bit. We're using the talent and the situation to figure out as best as possible how these teams use it, these players, but it's very difficult. And this is why I'm looking at Travis Kelce or in a lot of leagues, and we said go after TJ Hockenson as well, so you don't have to deal with this stuff. But if you have to get a mix of maybe reliable and upside, I think that's the way I would go. That way you have maybe playing the matchups and all that. So we'll give you a few more names to consider in the rankings 17 through 24 as we wrap up our look at our fantasy football rankings with the tight ends. We'll get into that in our final segment here. Welcome to Locked On Fantasy Football, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in the league. We're part of Locked On Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen today, and we'll have for you next week a mock draft spectacular. So Michelle will dive into our picks and our strategies and all that good stuff here. So mock drafting all week long next week on Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, Michelle, it's time to close this week and look at the end of our tight end rankings. So I'll go down yours first. Luke Musgrave at 17. Tyler Higbee at 18. Dalton Kincaid, you mentioned, just a few spots lower at 19. Cole Kmet at 20, Hayden Hurst at 21, Jake Ferguson 22nd. You have Juwan Johnson down at 23, so a little bit different there. And Michael Mayer is your guy running it out, the rookie from the Raiders at 24. I've got Tyler Higbee at 17, so pretty close to yours. Cole Kmet at 18. I have Hunter Henry. I like him still, but I'm at 19. We're about even on Hayden Hurst. Michael Mayer, I have up to 21. I've included Irv Smith Jr. and thrown down two names that you didn't have on the list either, Trey McBride and Tyler Conklin. So let's look at the differences here. First, let's start with your two notable guys. And right at the top, number 17, the rookie from the Packers, Luke Musgrave. And then go down a little bit more with Dalton Schultz gone in Dallas. You got like Jake Ferguson. Sell us on those two guys.
Yeah, so Luke Musgrave was super talented tight end coming out of school. He gets drafted in the second round by the Packers. He's very, very athletic, right? And we didn't know. So coming into camp, we didn't know if it was going to be Luke Musgrave or Tucker Kraft because they drafted both of those guys early in this year's NFL draft. It seems to be Musgrave has clearly taken the lead there in the tight end room and looks like he can be the starter for the Packers. And with this team being so unknown, Jordan Love being so unknown, I think that's kind of the situation where you want to take a chance on because he could be the top target. Not saying he will be, but there is a very clear path for him to do that, especially in the end zone, right? Once they actually get down to a scoring opportunity, he could definitely be that top guy there. So I'm willing to take a shot on him in his rookie season. And then Jake Ferguson is a guy I think we all need to just be paying more attention to. He's pretty much all but won the starting tight end spot in camp. He's taking over the Dalton Schultz role. And we have to remember, it's not like Dalton Schultz was a super special talent. It's not like everyone was like, oh, Dalton Schultz is going to break out. It's like, no, Dalton Schultz was a starter for the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott. And Dak Prescott loves to target the tight end. So with Jake Ferguson going into that role, there's no reason to be like Ferguson can't be as talented as Schultz. It's not like Schultz did anything super special. So I think Jake Ferguson is a guy that we're all overlooking and considering, or even counting me. I have him at tight end 22. That's probably too low because of the situation he's in. If he starts all year for this team and gets a good amount of snaps, he's going to finish as a top 12 tight end. Maybe bold take, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I like Jake Ferguson. I'm a little bit worried about, I love saying this guy's name, Peyton Hendershot. I just like that he's a decent athlete and he could get some work in, and then we'll see what Luke Schoonmaker does. But you're right. In the camp, Ferguson is separated from those younger tight ends and a little bit more established now, the Wisconsin product. So I do like him. We'll see how it plays out after CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks. We'll see if Michael Gallup really returns to form. That's going to be the key here with Ferguson. And then I'll look at Musgrave a little bit, but I'm on a wait and see approach. Like I like the upside. I'm just not sure. Like we weren't sure about Christian Watson. We're pivoting to Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed going to be there. I think it's part of the same question marks I have with Watson that you had there that you brought up. So just not sure the pecking order yet with the Packers and Jordan Love. So a little bit of unknown quantity despite the talent being high. So that's my one maybe reservation on going after Musgrave and drafting him. But I do agree with you on Ferguson. Now, I'll bring up some names, and I think I threw them in here mainly so we could talk about them. Because I'm not going to wait till 22 to probably get my tight end, but I've got Irv Smith Jr., Trey McBride, and Tyler Conklin. Now, Irv Smith I just mentioned because this guy was a pretty touted guy going for the Vikings and just didn't work out. They eventually had to cut ties and trade for Hockenson. It just didn't work out. He couldn't stay healthy on the field, but he flashed. He's got the very good skill set here that can stay on the field as a blocker. So I do like Irv Smith potential. We've seen flashes, however, only of CJ Uzomah and other guys in this offense. So I think you just have to temper expectations. I don't think you're going to get too much, but he's a really cheap tight end. He plays with Joe Burrow, and he's going to be right there behind Tyler Boyd as a target he's going to look at from time to time. Now, Trey McBride, I just think this guy is talent, and we'll see how it plays out with him and Ertz and just a little bit of a hunch there. And Tyler Conklin, I wanted to bring him up just because he's a little bit of an afterthought. He kind of flashed when he was in Minnesota before he got that contract with the Jets. He got a terrible quarterback situation, of course, last year. Now he gets Aaron Rodgers. Conklin was right there at tight end 16, so that says that he's going to maybe outperform what he's doing right now with his ranking. So Conklin is a good offense. I think there'd be a separation there. Speaking of Uzomah, I think he's the guy they look at more in the passing game, and there's not a lot that you feel after you look at Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard. Corey Davis, can we trust him? I'm not quite sure. So there's a little bit of opening there in the passing game. And we know Aaron Rodgers, they like to use 12 personnel with Nathaniel Hackett. He likes throwing the tight end. He liked Robert Tonyan quite a bit. So Conklin, a little bit of a deep sleeper for me at 24. And really, Smith and McBride, a little bit of flyers and hunches, but Conklin is the guy I feel maybe the best about.
Yeah, I think you may have talked me into Tyler Conklin a bit. I think I am overlooking him with Aaron Rodgers. And it feels like Aaron Rodgers has so many weapons to use, but does he really? It's Garrett Wilson, and then Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, Corey. Like it's not like those are like super elite players there, right? So Tyler Conklin could definitely be utilized a lot in this offense, and Aaron Rodgers has targeted his tight ends, especially near the goal line. So Tyler Conklin is one that if you're waiting forever for a tight end, or if it's a 2 tight end league, maybe you consider taking him there. I really have zero desire on Irv Smith or Trey McBride. Like I'm completely out.
I just threw it out. It was a snort worthy.
Irv Smith might have some, like Hayden Hurst had some decent games with the Bengals last year, but he was more like a streamer. If it's like an amazing matchup for the tight end position, fine, but I'm not touching him in the draft.
Yeah, I think this is our first snort of this.
Yeah, first snort. I'm going to start taking tallies now. How many times can I make Vinny snort? We're going to just count them throughout the year.
But just like I may have talked you into Tyler Conklin, you may have talked me out of Hurst Smith. So it's fair. I think that's fair if we're going to look at it there. Good. So we also have 2 guys we love. I love a litter of names, and these are game names you look at for sure. It's trying to say these names several times fast. It's hard here. Hunter Henry, Hayden Hurst, Hayden, Henry, Hunter. You could call them anything with these guys, but they're back-to-back in my rankings. I probably did that for the purposes of this bit. But when you look at it with Hayden Hurst, let's talk about him first, because, again, you look at Bryce Young. He's a young quarterback. Who's he throwing to? I mean, we'll see about Jonathan Mingo if he can have a key role here. But DJ Chark has to stay healthy. Adam Thielen has to stay healthy. I saw a little bit of connection there in that first preseason game, Young and Hurst. And we know, again, rookie quarterbacks like to target the tight end, so Hurst could have some value. He's had some sneaky value. This guy's like bounced around everywhere trying to find a home to really produce. So that's something to watch. And Hunter Henry, we talked about it. Juju Smith-Schuster is the best option. Mike Gesicki is not much of a threat here. What else do they have at receiver? 2 years ago, Hunter Henry was a massive red zone target when fully healthy here for Mac Jones. So I like these 2 guys. It's sneaky value. I think at least you can have them in a platoon or stream situation where they're going to give you value once you have the data where we know, okay, well, this team is bad against the tight end, we know how that works, right? That data usually does not let us down. Come week 5, week 6, we're rolling and we know what guys to play.
Yeah, so with Hunter Henry, I actually have him as a viable draft pick, right? I have him as my tight end 11. We've talked about him a lot. I think he can get close to 100 targets this year. I think saying that he can get double-digit touchdowns is also in the realm of possibilities. He had 9 just in 2021 with the Patriots. So I do think he's a viable draft pick. With Hayden Hurst, I have him down at tight end 21. So it's not like I'm saying you should draft him, but I do think he will be someone that can be picked up off waivers from week to week in nice matchups. It's how he was last year with the Bengals. Now, obviously, he's downgrading in offenses going from the Bengals to the Panthers, but he's upgrading his target volume, you would think, because he had to compete with Chase and Higgins with the Bengals. And like you already said, there's really nobody there for Bryce Young. And it does seem like from training camp reports that Bryce Young is targeting Hayden Hurst a lot. So if he's going to need a lot of targets to be anything in this offense, because I don't foresee a bunch of touchdowns. But in the correct matchups, I think he's going to get 7, 8, 9 targets in some games, and he'll be a very viable PPR player in specific weeks.
Yeah, so keep those guys in mind. Don't totally forget about them. They've had some history in the past, and keep in mind they were good at one point and drafted really high for the Chargers and the Ravens, respectively. There, so don't forget about that pedigree. And another guy that was drafted pretty high. And look, Cole Kmet is there, but the new Notre Dame tight end that I'm going to focus the attention on is Michael Mayer. I really liked Michael Mayer in college. Every time I watched Notre Dame play, he seemed to make a big impact play. He fired up that offense quite a bit. Doesn't matter who is at quarterback. So I look at this guy. I mean, there's not much competition. We talked about Jacoby Myers potentially being a target that I kind of like, but do we trust Myers completely? No. And you have Hunter Renfrow in the mix. You got Devontae Adams there and some guys that can take away the coverage. And all they have at tight end is Austin Hooper, who seems to be the Hayden Hurst of another dimension here, go switching teams every year. And then you look at just OJ Howard, just a blocking tight end. So these are the guys he has to beat out. He's played pretty well in camp. I think he's worth a flyer. I think the upside is there and might have an easier path than Kincaid to key targets in his offense, much like LaPorta.
Yeah, I'm not all the way there with you. I mean, we're pretty close in our rankings, right? You have him at tight end 21. I have him at tight end 24. It's more just yeah, he's a rookie. He has upside and, he's a talented player, but I don't think he's going to get that many targets this year or score more than a couple touchdowns. So I'm not going to consider drafting him, but I'll keep an eye on him. And yeah, if he comes out in the first few weeks and he starts having good games, I will, put a waiver bid on him or use my fab. But in the drafts, I'm out on Michael Mayer.
Yeah, I'm going to watch him for sure just because of the situation. Everything lines up. Jimmy Garoppolo likes George Kittle. Josh McDaniels likes his tight end. So I think it lines up with the situation. But we have to see how much they want to use him. And again, I don't know what you're going to get from the Raiders passing him exactly in this transition. So something to watch there for sure. But Michelle, I think we did a great job here with the top 24 tight ends on the board and given you fantasy managers something to think about. We will give you a lot more to think about next week as we do our mock draft week. We'll break down how the picks could play out all the way through the last pick that you can consider in your draft. So a lot of good stuff coming at you as we advance scout here for fantasy football. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.